everybody. Hi, this is Heather with the Leadership with Heart podcast. And today I am quadruple thrilled to have my guests on the show. They are, oh my gosh, it's like the first welcome of at least the first four of the certified Art of Active Listening facilitators. You've heard me talk about this so much, and I just wanted to invite them on. I have another show I'll be doing with another two of them, my six founding facilitators. So excited. And so we have Mike Chanat, we have Laurent Pierre, we have Kaydie Paschall, and we have Sherry Martin. And they're all on here as special guests. And we're going to be talking about the certification program and talking about the impact of listening at work and some of their experiences and maybe how they feel about having gone through the program and what their excitement is, and even some of their reservations and what those might be as it relates to the program as well. So welcome, everybody.
Hello.
Thank you.
Yay! I love it. Like more than one voice chimes in. I love it.
Yes.
Okay, well, let me start first with Sherry. Okay, Sherry, I'm going to start with you, who always ends up being like, what question are you going to ask me? What question? What do you see like right now, even if you have or haven't actually conducted any of the workshops, the Art of Active Listening workshops, what do you see is the value of the certification as a whole? Like, how would it add to your work? What do you think it's going to add to you as a professional at work?
Oh, thank you for that question, Heather. One of the things I see is credibility to the work that we do in human resources. The work that we're trying to get over the goal line with different talent management programs, as well as engaging when there's conflict or communication challenges between supervisors and employees. I'm finding myself, as I think through my communications, am I following the 5-step model to make sure people are experiencing me from that space that will then increase the credibility for this training and just even feeling seen, heard, and understood.
I love that. And of course, as you can hear, Sherry happens to be in human resources. Not everybody on here is. And that's what I love about the founding group. And I think just how this facilitator program really can speak to so many people's hearts and their desires to be changes at work, because there's just a lot of different diversity inside this group. So thank you for that, Sherry. That's helpful. How about you, Mike? What about you? What field
I'm
are
glad.
you in?
I am
What
so
field are
glad you
you
called
in?
on me because I'm gonna coattail a little off of Sherry. Sherry's coming from the human resources part, and she was saying how supervisors can benefit speaking with their people. Being a supervisor myself as a lieutenant amongst paramedics, I found myself being a little more aware of how I communicate with the people. And while I always had in my head that I would follow up with things, I found through your program the need to be able to tell them that if you listen to them and you understand what they want, tell them you're going to follow up with them, tell them what you're going to do and close that loop. And then once you start taking action, coming back and giving them a follow-up saying, hey, listen, this is where I am. I know I told you it would be a week, but I'm sorry. We got caught up on a few things, but I'm still listening to you. I'm still following up for you. So it was just one of the things to kind of sharpen my own personal skills as a supervisor at work. But in general, in my profession, we listen to patients all the time. And so being able to listen to them, understand them, make those connections, it helps us to do our jobs better. You and I had a conversation about how there's going to be a lot more people that are going to be retiring, a lot more people that are now, because of healthcare, getting older and living longer. But we're going to need to be able to look after them and care for them. And in order to care for them, we as leaders need to be caring. And one way of showing how we care is actually listening to somebody, showing them and touching their heart that we understood what they were going through, what they needed, who they are, where they are, and as you had said, Sherry, that they're seen as an individual, not just something coming through a system or at work, just another employee, another number.
I love that. I love that. How about you, Laurent? What about you? What do you see impacts to just how you're working now? Boy, you've just taken over a really big global role. And have you just seen any difference after going through the certification training, kind of how you operate? And then how do you see the impacts could be for even your global operations?
So interesting enough, I'm going to take a slightly different turn, both for personally and professionally. So my 87-year-old father is kind of at a point where he needs a lot of assistance and care. And so I have a lot of folks coming to the house, nurses and home health aides, etc. And his biggest thing is he used to be a general manager, executive person. And so to be so dependent on folks is something that really bothers him. And so, one day I was over there and he says to me, son, I like when you come over because you actually are listening to what I need, as crazy as it is, as it sounds. And so 9 o'clock at night, he's like, it's time for eggs and bacon. And I'm gonna go do that. Or he'll say, my eye is scratching, but the nurse's aides weren't really paying attention. And literally he needed like a wash to go in his eye because that it was a little dry. I share that personal story because here's personally in my family, my father, he's saying, I just want somebody to listen to me just for one thing so I can actually have someone respond to something that I'm saying. And that to me was like, I probably would have been maybe a little bit more impatient to go back to my computer to go do things because sometimes I work from there to help out during the day. And I found myself even ever since we engaged, just listening differently than I would have before. And that's from a personal side. And it impacted me that way because, as you know, at that age, there's a lot going on. It's super complex, what we're dealing with here. So from that perspective, I would say there. Professionally at work, I just inherited a global team, and this global team pretty much operated independently. And so at NIQ, there were a lot of companies purchased. There are a lot of teams that were reporting in different structures and a lot of silos. It's not any different than any corporation. There's a lot of silos going around. And so it's kind of like you see situations sometimes where people meet and then they go back off and do what they're doing. And so I'm finding that I'm having to really listen for things that aren't being said, but I can tell based on the cues in the room that they're not connecting together. And so I find myself even at work listening differently, responding, and to Mike's point, that follow-up, where I'm doing more of that following up so things don't fall through the cracks and people don't go back to their old ways of non-collaboration. So for me, that's the impact both at home, but also in the office.
Oh my gosh, that gave me the chills on both sides. But that, of course, your father example really, really hit home. And I appreciate you sharing that. Thank you. Kaydie, how about you?
I'm just fascinated listening to all of this because I'm in training and development, first time ever really working under the HR department. I jokingly said I went over from operational training to the dark side working for HR.
Hey.
But I am HR now, and I'm loving being a part of it in the organization I'm in. And I'm also formerly in emergency management. Mike, I used to coordinate citizen core programs for the Washoe County Sheriff's Office. So
nice.
EMTs, I speak cop, firefighter, and EMT.
It's a whole unique language.
I didn't have that much in common with Laurent from what little I had been told, but I have an 87-year-old mother and an 89-year-old father who are right on the cusp of needing all that. And I am here on property to be the sibling on site to help provide support during that transition. And absolutely, it has helped me with my communication with my siblings who are not on site, with my communication with my mother, and recognizing that her being upset about the fact that she told us emphatically that it was Friday on Wednesday morning. And when she found out she was wrong and it was only Wednesday, she was upset. And she wasn't upset about the day. She was upset about the fact that she was not,
Remember
where she wanted to be.
Yeah.
There was a problem with something with her medication, and we were able to help resolve that. And today she's just having a really good day, and she knows what day it is and she's happy. But those listening skills that this gives you when you practice it and work at it, for your personal, I told my boss when I found out about this, I said, I know you told me you wanted me to find a certification program as part of my professional development, and I found one, but I just want to let you know that even if you don't approve this as part of my training this year,
I'm taking it.
Exactly.
That was actually what he told me was one of the things that convinced him that he was going to send me and pay for it, because he's like, I didn't have to worry about whether you were committed to it or not. I knew you were going to go do it. So it wasn't like, am I making a bad investment or a good one? It was, she's going to go do it. And I know this will be hugely beneficial to our organization. So yes, I and my manager and director have wholeheartedly supported every bit of this for me. And we are all excited. I just met with them this morning to talk about how we're going to roll it out now that I'm certified and getting ready to bring it through our organization.
That's awesome.
Kaydie, starting with you, what part of the cycle of active listening do you think most people overlook?
Well, I think decoding is not done. That was the biggest one for me to kind of wrap my head around, whether I was doing that or not. But also, that to me is from a personal sense, from a business sense. I think the closing of the loop is and communicating of action are the biggest things. People do listen and go do stuff, but they don't bring it back. And I found when I was working with the citizen corps programs in Washoe County when I first started there, and they were a little bit resistant to me because I wasn't a deputy, I wasn't a real first responder, and these organizations had been established under that sheriff. Mike knows what I'm talking about. Yeah. When I found out what the things they were wanting were, and I would go into each one of their meetings and say, oh, here's what I've done. We're still working on that, but here's what I've done so far. It was huge for building trust. I mean, there was one man, the first time I showed up, he gave me a dressing down about how I had no business being there and how offended he was that I was even in that role. And about the 6th meeting I walked into, he smiled when he saw me. And then he got mad at himself because he determined he wasn't going to like me and I was messing that all up.
Ah.
Because of this very activity of me finding out what was really going on, what they really wanted, and then not only just going and taking action on it, but reporting back to them. So it wasn't just I'll work on it. And then if I was successful, let them know. And if I'm not, just drop it. It was, here's what I've tried. Here's what I've got in motion. Can't make any guarantees, but here's what I've done. And it was really amazing. Within a year, not only was that group of people that had been opposed to me, working collaboratively with me, but when other people would say something about whether I was qualified for that role or she's not a real deputy or whatever, those were the people who said, yeah, I didn't like her at first either, but she's awesome. I mean, they were the ones who defended me. They're like, I used to think that about her too, but she's doing it. And all of that I can attribute to applying these very things in the cycle here that made that happen.
Lovely. Hey, Mike, I'm curious. So what do you think? Because I know we talk a lot about empathy and communication mindset. That's kind of your three-pronged pillar. What do you think about this kind of cycle of active listening, this framework? What do you think about this differs from traditional communication beliefs, like how people think of communication?
I think those people that actually understand empathy know that you need to understand the people. They get that portion of the cycle of the connection of the team building or the relationship building. But the part that I think that they miss is after they understand, what do they do with that information? How do they take the data, put it together, understand? Do they continue getting back to the patient as opposed to, in my scenario, we kind of rush people either from their house into the ambulance or from the ambulance into the emergency room, and people are coming and going, and no one's really talking, listening, understanding that they're scared, understanding that they're having the worst day of their life, and getting back to them and being able to speak to them to say, listen, I understand you, I feel you, I see you, and this is what we're doing. This way you're kind of holding their hand, because I tell a lot of my students when I teach, or my orientees when they're coming in as new hires, I said, we might have all these bags full of equipment and medications and things, but the biggest thing that you can sometimes do for a patient is to hold their hand. And if you're explaining and getting back to these people and you're telling them what they're doing, they're understanding what's happening, it makes it a lot easier for them. And that empathy is just so much better. And following up when they ring that call bell and they want you to come in. And I was recently back in September in the hospital, as you remember, and being able to have people that were coming in and saying, okay, we understand, we hear, we'll be back in 5 minutes. We have something going on with another patient, or I need to finish doing this. letting people know where they are in the process and that you are getting back to them. And then, like we were saying, these are the steps that I'm taking to make sure that you get what you need and to support them.
I love that.
Mhm.
Yeah, that's Sherry, I'm curious to know, has anything changed as it relates to kind of team collaboration or dynamics after you going through this certification program? Like, do you feel like the collaboration or dynamics in your team in HR has changed at all?
I think I have changed, which then causes the team to change. And
Yes.
also, I think at home too, though my 14-year-old teenager would say, I don't listen very well. I'll just put it there. Um, I would say too, when it comes to communication, I'm a big proponent of being transparent. And part of that transparency is saying, okay, what are we doing about this? And even if it's something that somebody doesn't want to hear, it's still, we heard you, we see you, and this is what we can do right now at this moment. It's not a no, it's this is where we're at. This is what we need to do first in order to get to whatever that next phase of something is. I will say, I find a lot of times in my work, a lot of supervisors have trouble having conversations with folks and understanding what that cycle is because they're so busy with the work. How do you take yourself step outside of that and see the person who's in front of you to hear what their concern is or what they need support for, or maybe what they might need help problem solving? And it's being able to have that conversation and understanding what is the action that you need to take, or maybe you don't need to take action, but whatever that is, how do you follow up and close that loop? So part of what I see my work too is being that conduit to start to lay the foundation of the cycle of active listening, for folks to then be able to see where they need to step in better and be more effective.
That's really good. Laurent, as someone who's completed the certification, I am curious, especially going back to that first example of like the cultural differences and the decisions you have to make, and how people, it could be a little tenuous. And how do you think like handling disagreements or conflicts in the workplace are going to be different for you now, given this new certification?
No, it's a great question because I find myself approaching those conflicts a little differently than I would have in the past, and I'll tell you what I mean. I'm a solution oriented type of person, and especially when my plate is full, I'll jump right to, like, I'll listen to a snippet and say, okay, this is what needs to happen. You go do this with so and so, and I got to go run to this meeting now. Let me know if you can't figure it out in a couple of days. And literally, depending on the issue, and what I find myself doing now is kind of being that facilitator of, okay, here's what I heard from here. Here's what I heard from there. In between here, there's some kind of truth. Let's figure that out. We got 28 minutes to do that. And I use better words, but essentially that's what I say. And what I found fascinating is all of a sudden when you frame it in a way of taking out the people's personalities, and it's like let's all focus on the problem versus it's Heather, that's the issue, right? Let's focus on what is it that you're not getting. And even recently, as of 3 weeks ago, I found a conflict in the office was about the data. One person saw the data one way, the other person saw the data the other way, and they were talking past each other. And it wasn't until I put it up on the screen and I said, what is the issue that we're having here? And then that's when we were able to say, oh, well, that's what I thought it meant this. And I thought you were saying that. And then all of a sudden they're like, oh, well, we should get together with everyone else because the entire team thinks this. And so it was one of those things where I was like, oh, I just had to facilitate that. I didn't have to come up with the solution. I didn't have to say, here's what you are doing. But all of a sudden they came with what they needed to do. And I just stepped back and then watched it happen to the point where now they're off and running with their respective teams figuring this out. And then they're just giving me FYI, we did this worked, and we're moving forward together. And it's that type of thing that typically I would have jumped in and said, look, this is what needs to happen. Go do. And so I'm even changing the way in which I would do it, especially when I'm so time crunch. I mean, Heather, I'm time crunch between home and my dad and work and whatnot. And so I sometimes am am driven to go and run fast, where sometimes I really need to pause, listen, reflect, and then go forward. And so, like I said, I would not have changed my approach, and I would have probably kept going the way that I'm going, because there's a lot on my plate, and my plate runneth over pretty much every day. So that's kind of where I am there.
That's awesome.
And
I'm
Lauren,
curious.
I
Oh,
just
go
want
ahead.
to say, Lauren, I love that approach, because a lot of times people think, oh, this person's a problem. And the person is not the problem. The person has a problem. So what is the problem that they're trying to solve? And a
Yes.
lot of times there's a breakdown in communication, process, procedure, policy. So if you can take the people out of it and focus on what's the root cause, then folks can see one another to say, oh, you're also struggling with this. So I love that approach, to step back and say, what's the problem? It's not the people. What's the problem?
Exactly. And there's a coach of mine always said, let's assume positive intent here,
Yes.
and that the person's not trying to sabotage you. So and so doesn't like me. It's like, no, assume positive intent. People don't come to work every day saying, how can I mess Heather up today? In general.
In
They
general,
just don't. We usually come to work trying to do a good job, and go home and say, I did a good job today. And I literally said that in another meeting. I said, why don't we assume positive intent first until you can prove otherwise? And oh, by the way, don't go looking to prove it. Just assume that everyone comes to work wanting to do a good job. And yes, there's going to be conflict in the work, but it's how you respond and how you deal with it. That's the part that really matters. And when I said that, it was funny. You could see it in the room. Everyone's assumed positive intent, and just that phrase it kind of set the tone for the rest of the meeting.
And I love too what I love about what you said earlier that you wouldn't have done before the certification is this idea of leaning with more curiosity and deciding that while I want a solution, I'm going to help find a solution through leaning with curiosity and kind of this openness to hear what was needed to be heard inside the space. So there was this kind of fluidity in the interactions that created even more safety, I think, for those in the room, because they knew you were there, not trying to be to have the solution on the spot, but to help the group find it as a whole. That's not an easy place to land on, and to say I'm going to turn in that facilitative role and be really skilled in that regard. So that's makes me very happy to hear that you did that.
I was going to say that from Kaydie probably knows this from training and development. When you have students, you have people, a lot of times trying to create that environment for them to learn to be willing to tell you their mistakes or their fears and what they're afraid of, allows you to move forward and to find that solution, or for them to find that solution, because you're making that area for them to come out to you. They know that they can trust you, and you build that relationship. And in the future, when something's maybe not as big of an issue, they'll still come to you with it, because they'll know that you're going to listen no matter whether it's big or small, and they're not afraid of it.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and
I'm
so
curious.
much of our work is
Okay.
relational. Right?
Yes.
We get things done through people, not through things.
Yes.
And so I heard you say trust and relationships, and that's being able to see people for people as humans.
Love that so much. Kaydie, how has the certification program, and I know you just went through it, but how has it really influenced your approach to giving and receiving feedback at work? Have you noticed any changes there since you kind of went through the program, finalized it, and have now been on your way of how do I roll it out? Who am I talking to? How has that really influenced your approach to giving and receiving feedback?
Well, number one, just my own accountability. If I want to teach this to people, I've got to be doing it myself. Otherwise, I have no credibility. The other, Marcus and Patrick met you at the half-year global leadership event, and I have noticed, so now that I've been through the training, I've noticed, oh, that's why Marcus and Patrick started doing that. I've noticed the changes in my own leadership from just the training they received from you. And of course, that was part of the reason why they were so excited when I found you as a certification program to send me, because they had already met you and I was not aware of that. I knew Patrick knew you, but I didn't know that my manager had also been a part of that program. So I've I've started to see it in action with both of them and with myself, and how I approach different things, and also, you know, just gathering more from certain. I guess you can say I've been employing the cycle successfully in such a way that people who weren't giving me much feedback or information I've started getting more info. So I'm excited about that, because people that for whatever reason didn't feel as comfortable sharing with me before have started sharing more. So that's allowed me to do more, because I've employed some things that have apparently created a safer or more inviting space for them. I'm not sure. I know it's working. I'm not sure exactly what was the problem, but I know that what I've been doing, I've been getting some people that I was wanting more from, but they seem to hesitate now. Whatever the changes and adjustments I've made, they're talking to me more about what they hadn't been talking about before. So that's been exciting to me.
Very cool. Oh, I love that. And you and I'll have to talk offline a little bit more on that, because now I'm so curious.
I love the
good.
word that you used, inviting, creating that open environment that they want to come.
And they feel safe around you. So
Yes.
part of what I envision with this cycle is that it helps to build relationships. It helps to build trust, because I feel psychologically safe with you, because I know you hear me. I know that you're listening, and I know you're doing something about it.
Mike, curious.
Yes.
So in my mind, when I think of listening, I see it is tied to communication. Explain to me how you think listening is at the root of all communication.
As far as listening, if you have a message, if someone's communication includes transmitting a message, transmitting a thought, an idea. As leaders, we try to share visions, missions. As supervisors, we have specific tasks. Even as frontline responders, when we're in the field, we sometimes have a hierarchy amongst ourselves where we have to give orders, give directions, and make sure that things are getting done. So there's always a message, and if the people aren't hearing it and processing it and understanding it and able to implement it and give you that feedback that, yes, I understood, you want me to go get this, to do that, or you need me to be here at that particular time to handle that event or that individual. If you're not listening, then nothing is getting across, and we as leaders fail at that point. And our jobs is to remove all these barriers. And in order to remove the barriers, we need to listen to what they are saying. And as you said, it's the key part of communicating. Talking, your mouth, your lips, your gums flapping, that's not getting anything across to anybody. It's when you understand it, the old adage of you've got two ears and one mouth, you should be listening twice as much as you're speaking. And if you're going to understand, and you're going to make tactical decisions as a leader, you need to hit everybody's input. You need to listen to what they're telling you, because they're going to be seeing things from a different standpoint of view than from where you are, whether physically or just as metaphorically, being in a different point. And it's all this data that you take in that's going to help you make the best decision in those situations, because sometimes we're in a less than ideal situation and we have to make a split-second decision. So you want to be able to get as much from people. And the only way you're going to get it is by actually listening, taking it in. And sometimes we tell people, when you're driving isn't just a visual thing. You need to listen to the sound of the road, the sound that your tires are making, the sound that your engine is making, as to whether it's revving too high or it's not missing a gear. And this is all part of like my driver education training that I give to people. But again, listening is very important to that standpoint of view, to get information and to be able to complete that cycle of communication, because it's giving you information. Are you receiving that feedback? Are you using and processing that feedback and then acting on it and doing something with it? Because if we don't act on it, did we really listen? Did we really understand them? Did we really do anything for them?
I love that. Sherry, question for you.
Yes.
What does listening mean to you now that you have this newfound knowledge that maybe it didn't mean to you beforehand?
I think it's about leaning in more, being more curious, because I am someone just like you, Laurent. I like to help solve so we can move forward. But knowing that I don't have all the answers, and knowing it's okay for me not to have all the
Exactly.
answers. And who can I reach out to that can help provide me with a different perspective? And it's okay to have that different perspective, because that's part of decoding all the information I have. I also think about the ways in which I do need to decode. Do I need to do it by myself, my team members, my supervisor, someone who is outside my department? Who's in my trusted circle, I guess I would say, to be able to do that. So I think that's in the areas where, for me, it's really leaning in more and envisioning what that cycle is looking like as I'm talking to somebody, to say, am I doing all that I need to do, and paying attention to the body language of that person in front of me to say, is there more? So I think there's a lot that I need to be better at with the unsaid.
Yeah.
Oh, I love that. I love your internal view there. Because it's like, it doesn't really matter that you go through the certification program, and it makes you more aware of like where the gaps are and where you could get better. That the same would apply to me too, by the way. And I wrote the book on it. And but I think it is that introspection and that desire to be better that does make people who sign on for the certification kind of unique. It's the awareness and the desire to say, I'm going to do this. I'm going to not just be the change for help other people change, but I'm going to be the change within myself to take on these skills and really live them and embody them. It takes, I think, special people to be that way. It's easy for us to go train other people, and then us for not to hold our own selves accountable, as Kaydie was talking about. And I think,
and Heather, I
this
would
is
also
cool.
say, part of it is I have to think about, how are people experiencing me? How do they feel after interacting with me? Is it a positive experience? Is it a negative experience? Is it a neutral experience? What else do I need to do to help cultivate that relationship? So it's all encompassing.
Absolutely. Laurent, the same question to you. What does listening mean to you now that you have this newfound knowledge that it maybe didn't mean to you before?
So I think for me, I'll start with personal one. So my 18-year-old son, literally, it's like my profile. So it's like basically arguing with myself, right? So it's like futile. And so he's taken this approach of this calm kind of demeanor, and he's like, Dad, you're not getting it yet. You're not understanding what I'm saying. And it's like, okay, so I actually just didn't try to solve right really quickly. And even him, he was like, are you taking like a special class or something? Because this is going completely different than the way this that I thought in my head. So I thought it was hilarious, because I started applying it, because I really was trying to decode the 18-year-old speak, right? And I found a breakthrough, and I share that personally, because even interactions at home are different, because for those of you who have teenagers, like they're special. They're not like when we were growing up. Okay, they're special. And so it's going to take a different kind of parenting to get through, right? Not what we grew up with, because I said so, or else, or that look across the room that says, okay, forget about it, I'll just go back to what I was doing. And so I see that not only at home, but even when, like, as I say things, because even in my role, so I'm not a very hierarchical person, right? But apparently certain places here, because of the senior VP title, like my emails and even my team's messages, I've got to be extra careful, because people interpret things differently. And typically, like, because I have people around the world, sometimes the calls are recorded. And then I find people reaching out saying, I listened to your call and you said this, it's giving this region concern about blah, 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 whatever it was. And I'm like, wait a second. And it was just something I just said, maybe a sentence or two. And I went back and listened to the recording and I said, I could see why that person interpreted it that way. That I was like the new person was about to make a decision that's going to impact an entire region. It's like, no, I was just having a brainstorming type of conversation. So the flip side of it is not only listening, but what I say and how people are going to interpret it as well is becoming more important. And also I'm super careful in the sense, not careful in like a paranoia kind of way, but in how it will be perceived, something that I type and write. And so we all know this, email versus verbal, it comes across differently. And I'm starting to, not starting, but I'm finding myself more conscious of, this is a phone call, not an email. And I would just stop what I was writing and pick up the phone and have that one-on-one conversation before you send an email. Basically, we've all experienced this, I'm sure. You send an email to Sherry and Sherry copies 4 other people. And then all of a sudden, this thing is grown legs and it's all around the organization. And so those are the kind of things that those unsaid cues, I'm finding myself looking at more. In meetings, I'm finding myself looking at the reactions. And when I see a head turn like this or a grimace on the face, I can adapt and I just basically say, so Heather, I saw a reaction there. Before I continue on the next slide, what was wrong with what something went wrong there, right? And then I would open it up that way. And so I find myself doing those types of things. Sometimes on demand, sometimes I take a note and say, okay, I got to go follow up with Mike later because I could see on his face he wasn't receiving what I was presenting on there, and you just have to make those choices at the end of the day.
Oh, I love that so much. Kaydie, same for you actually. What does listening mean to you now that maybe it didn't mean to you before you come to this certification program?
Well, one of the things that I told you when we first met was how I love the fact that so much of the work that I had done in citizen core and emergency management, people were asking me why I was succeeding, and I didn't feel like I have a way to tell them without it being all touchy-feely. And I was working around first responders. Feel is not the word we want to use, and so it was great to me to see the framework and the structure and the strategy to it as far as understanding why this has the impact. I was in a position in multiple areas of my life where I felt like I wasn't being listened to. And I've learned through the years that when I'm upset about something, it's probably something I'm doing that I'm seeing other people do to me, and that's why I'm so upset about it. So that was one of the impetuses for me to I said, active listening. I need, and if I'm thinking somebody in my family is not listening well, where did they learn to listen? Well, they learned to listen the same place I learned to listen. So maybe none of us are listening well, me included. How can I have found that the more I have focused on being that better listener, it has had much more of an impact. And suddenly I am finding conversations with other people where I'm being heard. And it's I would have probably told you before I met you that listening, I would have described it in a much more passive way, in a much more collecting intel way. And now I see it as a huge tool for change, a very powerful tool for making organizational changes in a significant way. I mean, I've just barely applied it, and it's made a huge difference in many areas of my life. I've just started really, really consciously, in the steps and in the cycle, the steps of that really just barely kind of made those little slight adjustments and slight changes, and I've seen a huge difference already. And I can't wait to roll this out to my organization and equip other people to do the same thing and to see collectively what kind of impact that we can have. I think it's going to be incredible.
I was going to say one of the small changes that I've noticed is I've had a few of my partners saying, wow, you have a great memory. and I don't think my memory's gotten better, and I don't think memory gets better with age. So I think, and I attribute it personally to actually listening, because it's not stuff that's just bouncing off of you. It's you're actually taking it in, you're processing it, and it becomes a part of you. So the reason that I'm able to remember a lot of things that the patients are saying or be able to speak back to them is because I am listening, and it's the little things that we learned in the class that pick up on doing this. There's a lot of stuff, not only professionally but personally, that the program has allowed me to improve on. And it's just like you were saying, Kaydie, just small little steps and nothing huge, but incrementally you keep getting better.
So good, so good. Okay, so now one last question for everybody. We're just going to go around. So for anybody who may be considering this, could be on the fence, kind of wondering, oh, is there going to be any value? Like, why should I do this? Could you give each person just give like a couple sentences of why people should really consider joining kind of our league of legendary listeners, like Kaydie likes to call us, joining our group to be change makers in the world. Let's go first to you, Sherry. Oh, so what would be if there's somebody who's on the verge, or somebody who's thinking about considering, and they might be on the verge. What do you think that might be the the thing that really should be the reason why they should consider it? Being part of this league of legendary listeners that Kaydie likes to refer to us as.
I think one, it helps with your own professional development, and thinking about the areas in your life where you want to improve, whether professionally or personally, and then thinking about how we bring this more to different groups or organizations, because usually what happens is it's the loudest person in the room that gets heard, and that's how decisions are made. And it really is important to hear other people's perspectives. And so how can you, as someone who goes through this certification for yourself as a facilitator, or whatever your role is in the organization, it's about, how do I role model and be that change agent so we really hear each other better, so we can make better decisions?
I love that. I love that. Laurent, what about you? For those who are considering.
So I think for others who are considering, I mean, for me, I look at the investment as an investment in yourself first. Because you can't really, as everyone has said here today, you can't really expect somebody else to change if they don't see a change in you. And so I think each of us has touched on the fact that someone's noticed something different. And for me, it's huge for me, because for me, my core values, God, family, and everything else. And so my kids, the fact that my 18-year-old, he's like the spitting image of me, is noticing. That's a huge deal for me, right? Because he's one of in every household, there's that independent one who wants to go off and do his own thing, not corporate life and whatnot. But then to hear it there, but also to see it applied at work, that is enough for me to say, yes, if you're on the fence, go make an investment, because this is not just about your corporate professional life. It's about relationships and improving those relationships, and how people are viewing you, but more importantly, how you're being available for them. And I always say to folks that people are like, oh, I'm always busy, but if you prioritize appropriately, right? People will say, hey, Mike took 5 minutes, even though Mike's super busy, just to listen, and he appreciates it. And so I think for me, if you're looking to be a better listener, if you're looking to improve relationships, if you're looking to improve culture, this is something that you need to take a look at as part of your tool set, because now I feel like I have a new something added to my arsenal of leadership, I like to call it, of things that I can use to be a better leader. Because as all of us are here on this call today, leadership is not something that is a one and done. It's a continuous piece, and it's like a craft. And so now I have something added to my arsenal that I can go pick from to go and apply it throughout the day, both on the personal side as well as the professional side.
Thank you so much for that. Mike, what about you? What would you say that people were like on the fence, or they're like, I don't know? What would you say?
Well, I'm probably going to date myself with this reference, but there used to be a TV commercial where they used to talk about Apex Tech. And as you learned how to use a tool, you were able to put that tool into your toolbox and then go out and make a living off of that. As Laurent was saying, it's all about relationships. One of my favorite sayings that I heard from one of my HR managers is your number one resource is your human resource. So if we're going to be building relationships, whether it's personally with our families and loved ones or with the people we work with and around us, it all begins with listening, and empathy doesn't come without listening. In order to be empathetic, you need to listen. In order to communicate, you need to listen. And having that growth mindset and investing in yourself personally, you only stem to get better at what you do, whether at work or at home. And I can't, like I was saying, there's all these little things that I'm noticing, whether it's people giving me feedback about how I'm different. And that's the whole point in going through life. It's a journey. It's about improving. It's about experiencing it. And if you're not listening, you're not really experiencing what's around you. Sometimes just sitting in the outdoors and hearing the wind rustle through the leaves or through the grass or something like that, that's also a part of listening. But that all feeds into your own mindset and well-being and wellness for yourself. So not only are you helping people unload their problems, you're also by listening, unloading your own problems sometimes or stress levels. So there's so many different levels of benefits, whether you're in healthcare, whether you're in textile, whether you're in emergency management, you're in corporate, in banking, it's all very relevant with listening.
Thank you so much, Mike. And Kaydie, what about you? What would you say to someone who's like, oh, they're on the fence, they don't know, there's another certification they're considering. Why this one?
I actually want to speak to the people who've just discovered this, who are just, this active listening thing is brand new to them. Because you know my story. You know, you talked about knowing Sherry for 3 years. I had gone to my boss and was making my professional development plans, and I just wanted to do a leadership summit. And he said, well, have you thought about getting any certification programs? And I told him, I said, most of the certification programs I've looked at are mostly like, it'd be 12 hours of my time for 1 hour worth of content. It's either stuff I've already been trained on, or it's fluff that I really don't need. And I just don't want to waste my time on something that's not going to be a real value to me, just because somebody thinks it would be good for me to have a new certification on my resume. But I'll look. That's all I promised him. And 3 days later, I'm on LinkedIn and I see Heather's announcement, and I read about it, that this facilitator program, and I made the comment, now that looks like a certification program I could get excited about. 3 minutes later, my director is commenting under my comment saying, I'm really looking forward to seeing what you find out about this. And 2 minutes after that, Heather reaches out to me and says, I'd really like to get together with you and talk about this and see if you could be a good fit for this. I haven't even read the book. I saw her on LinkedIn. That's, I remember vaguely my director talking about some great training that they received at the conference, but I'm like, what? I just volunteered to try out for a certification program. I better find out what this lady wrote so I know what to say to her when I talk to her. So I'm reading, immediately reading Caring Leadership, reading Art of Active Listening, going, oh, this person thinks like I do. This person, she put it in the right words so that business people will actually listen to it. I was so excited. And then obviously, here I am. But the thing is, I after going through that, I'm like, if you are new to this, don't think, that this is somebody just training their top participants or just bringing in people who've been with them on the whole journey. Jump in, because every bit of it was worthwhile. There was nothing in this training that I felt wasted my time in any way, shape, form, or fashion. And
like I was saying with the toolbox, it's so many tools you gave us to put on our toolbox, on our tool belt, and to arm us going out there as leaders, as supervisors, as managers, directors, to be able to make our jobs easier for ourselves, make lives easier and better for our employees and our patients. Everybody benefits from this.
What a great way to wrap up. I'm feeling really good about the decision to launch this program now that I've spoken to all of you. As I go, as at first I'm like, oh, is this the right thing? And then I hear from you and I think, okay, oh, the change is happening. And I love the fact that all of you
Yep.
said that the change is first happening in you. That just really touches my heart. I'm so glad to hear that. And then the fact that you know that people, I love that. I can't remember which one of you said it because, oh, it was you, Laurent, who was talking about the change in you and the change in others and that kind of parallel. And people, you want me to change, but you're not changing is a huge part of this. And so the transformation first happens in us, and then we become the catalyst to make change happen inside of the places that we're working and or in places that we're serving. So if we're consultants or trainers, then we're not inside of an organization. We are going to be inside of an organization because we're training other people to get better at this. So this has been very helpful for me. I can't tell you how much I'm so happy that you all are the part of this founding group, that we're going to go together and just kind of conquer the world and continue to show people how that they can listen more effectively to the voices that are in front of them, and to really those who need to be heard, to those who need to be seen, as we said earlier. Sherry said that so appropriately, and we need a lot of this in the world as we look at the headlines. If we see the divisiveness, if we see all the things that are going on, if we talk about kind of leaning in with that whole assuming positive intent way of things and being super curious about what the world has to hold for us, we all can make a huge difference. So I just wanted to thank you all from the bottom of my heart for saying yes. And I'm excited to see where you go on this journey as well.
Well, thank you for
Heather.
putting this together.
Absolutely.
Appreciate it.
Yep.
Thank you, everybody, for listening to this episode of the Leadership with Heart podcast.